Hello once again to the Better Man podcast. My name is Parkson, and today with me are three wonderful new friends that I made quite recently, and they are Mervin, Shu, and Hisk.
All right. Hi, I'm Mervin. I'm a psychotherapist at Tribe Psychology Clinic. I'm also a father as well as a speaker. I do some mentoring on the side as well. And I am someone who actually spends a lot of time thinking about the human condition, existential questions, and also, about human flourishing in general. Like, why are we here? What's the purpose of being alive? Where is humanity going towards? So very big questions, but things I really like thinking about because I think it's important to think about such things, right? Rather than just on a day to day going to work, earning money. But what is the purpose of being a person? I mean, we're going to discuss about what is the purpose of being a man, but I think before that, also the question is what's the purpose of being a person? So these are my areas of interest, and I really enjoy working with people in terms of, helping them to move towards the direction of growth and flourishing.
Thank you. Shu, would you like to go next?
Sure, no problem. So my name is Shu. I used to teach in university for quite a few years, but I'm currently on a career break. And I've known the two other guests, Mervin and his for 30 years. I mean, we met in 1994 in secondary school. And we've been in touch recently, and we started talking about a lot of deep things, very much what Mervin talked about. For much of our life, she kind of got into autopilot, what I call the train tracks of life, and we just clocked certain stations along the way, but we never really asked deeper questions about who we are, purpose, or even knew how to ask these questions. We just assumed that certain answers were very apparent. But in recent times, we started talking more and realized there's actually a lot that we don't know how to think about. And we had a series of very deep conversations, and I think that's very important as you get older, to figure out what you're doing with your life and how to even think about it, how to relate to people, and why we're here on planet Earth. It sounds very basic, but I mean, these are like first order questions that I think we very often never really get into for various reasons. So quite excited to talk about today's topic with everyone. This is an important one, especially since I'm a male, I'm a guy. Yeah. So masculinity should by definition be very much part of what I am, right? Yeah.
Yep, we'll find out. And last but not least, Hisk.
Good morning and hello everyone. My name is Hisk. Once I was a diplomat, now I'm just a mat. That's what I like to tell people as a short summary. I was a civil servant with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for up to 15 years. Since then, I've been bouncing around doing different things. Many thanks to Parkson for having us today, and to Mervin for agreeing when I told him that he should drag me and Shu into the discussion, because there's nothing we love more than to discuss this kind of issues together.
Yeah, and otherwise you say to me, hey, bochio.
Yeah, seriously.
All right, wow. I think we're going to have an interesting conversation today. And the topic today is masculinity. Are we man enough? Are you man enough? All right. And I think maybe the place to start talking about are you man enough is to first of all try to understand what is the meaning of manness or manliness or masculinity, right? So what is masculinity to your understanding?
So for me, masculinity, right, it's a concept that is inherited. It comes from long ago, and I don't think there's any one single definition that can fit everybody. Each of us have their own definition that's informed by our religion, culture, upbringing, and various other factors. But I think we can see some common traits across the board. Like, for example, strength being one of the masculine traits. Another one is probably assuming that role related to strength, I guess, as a protector and a provider. Violence and aggression, unfortunately, I think aspects that are normally associated with masculinity. Being a sort of a leader of the household, I guess that's one of the aspects as well.
Yeah, so to be honest, right, all my life, I never really thought too much. I just assumed certain things, right, about what masculinity was. But very much like what Iskandar highlighted, a couple of themes, right? So power, strength, clarity, maybe not being emotional. This sense of like being the leader, all right? Or maybe not leading, but having a plan, all right? Knowing what to do rather than feeling, right? So I've always associated that with masculinity. And of course, when we go into the weeds, the specific details, like how people dress, how people act, I mean, there are all these things which can be attributed to these broader themes, right? But to me, it's always been about this clarity, direction, knowing what to do. And that's been the hallmark of masculinity. Right?
Yeah.
to me. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, I think it's important first to differentiate sex and gender, right? Sex being what is biologically assigned to us upon conception, whether we have, the appropriate reproductive organs for a certain sex. But of course, gender then is about the masculine or feminine traits, or the norms, as Iskandar said, about what culture or history has taught us. But I think when it comes to masculinity, in terms of the traits, if we're looking at it from a psychology perspective, then there's things like assertiveness, independence, self-reliance. And I think one thing we also spoke about yesterday was about the willingness to take risk-taking behaviors. These are normally associated with masculinity, and it's normally positive associations as well. There's also I think the instrument what do you call it? Women is more towards communion, more towards connection with others, whereas men is more towards
Isolation.
not isolation lah, but it's a way of we are more towards agency, more towards goal orientation in a sense, achievement of personal goals, instrumental orientation, that sort of thing. So it's more towards objects. That's why men in general become engineers rather than PR or not saying that. I mean this is a generalization. But when we talk about men being stronger, we're talking about I think the potentiality because of the testosterone when we're going through puberty. It triggers certain changes in our body. So in general, if a man and woman both train, if you train the same way that your wife did, you'll definitely be masculinely stronger than her. Right, versus that she's training and you're not, then in that case, then probably she can lift heavier weights and all that. But that's just on the basis of training. But if you're talking about both doing the exact same thing, then men in general will be stronger just on the basis of hormones and the muscles and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yes, generally speaking, men or males have much higher levels of testosterone, which enables the male to build muscles. All right, but of course, testosterone level keeps dropping. From a certain age onwards, and so the later you start, the more difficult it is, but not impossible. Even at 65, they found that men at 65, at even 70, and they start doing strength training, they actually make gains, but there's a limit to the gains that you can make. I read this book, about it's called The Female Brain. And basically what it describes is, that when egg meets sperm, right, and the sperm is fertilized, right, so that's where conception takes place, life is formed. By default, it is female. Okay.
Yep.
And then as the embryo starts to multiply, the cell starts to multiply, all right, and the reproductive organs is formed, starts to take shape, all right. It's not fully formed, but starts to take shape. The shape it takes is basically of the female reproductive organ. But then at the 8th week after conception, all right. So depending on whether there is an XX chromosome or XY chromosome, if there's a Y chromosome, then suddenly there's a change, testosterone is released, and then the original form of the reproductive organ, which is female, starts to change and become male. Same thing with the brain, all right? The brain begins to rewire itself to become the male brain instead of female brain. So what's the difference between the male brain and the female brain is the male brain has more connections in the area of sympathy and emotional sensitivity and things, and empathy. The male brain is designed or wired to be more analytical, all right? And that's why most men are engineers, or most engineers are men, although you do have women who are engineers too, but, and 99% of inventors are male, all right? And things like that. So it's basically our brains being hardwired. And of course, the next time that testosterone surges is at puberty, right? And so for boys, that allows them to become muscular, to develop muscles and things like that,
Often at the cost of their
so-
brain.
and yes, and also their brains, they are rewiring again. So then I think that's a masculinity in that's the most basic and most significant difference between a male and a female, right? And I think when you talk about masculinity, in the past, I keep hearing, yes, aggression, assertiveness, and all these masculine traits. So if that is true, then you find that women today are also becoming more assertive.
Yeah.
Right.
Does that mean that they're becoming masculine?
So maybe I can jump in because actually this is fascinating. So we talk about the biological traits. So there's certain things, right, where biologically you're biased towards developing based on your sex, right? And I think strength is one that we talk about muscles, right? And then going back to this kind of first point about how masculinity or even being feminine, these traits are inherited culturally. So my thought process is like this: biologically, there are certain we have certain traits for males or females are biased with certain traits. And in society, are different roles. So I mean, maybe a bit reductionist, but very simplistically, say being in a farm, physical labor. So there's tended to be perhaps bias towards males going out to doing certain things, which are more physical. And as society developed, these roles tended to develop accordingly. And then, there was this kind of streaming into like what men do and what females do, initially based on like their biological traits or what they were good at physically, right? But then as society kind of progressed, certain things were set in stone, like men behave this way, females play that role, right? And this brings us to the present. And how are we unpacking all this? Because as you point out, your last point, Parkson, was females can become more masculine now, or they want to be, not necessarily biologically, but in terms of the traits displayed.
Yeah,
And so
but I
now
don't think they will necessarily see those as masculine traits. It's just traits, right?
Yeah,
They just want
so-
to be more assertive. They want to take more control over their future, their lives, their
Exactly.
direction.
So this is where we're at. Now we are like, we're at a crossroads of maybe these labels don't matter anymore. Masculine, feminine doesn't matter. It's just what exactly are we talking about? The values, the behavior, the traits. And so this is why I think, again, yesterday with this discussion, is masculinity, is this label useful? Especially now, when should we just be talking about people in general, what people should be or want to be or how they can be, right? So this is where we are right now. It's a bit of a confusing mess, right? And we're slowly trying to unpack this.
Kind of agree with you, or at least I'm on my way towards what you just said. Let's, maybe we should use less and less of these terms, masculine and feminine, right? Because it was useful at a certain time in our history, all right? But today you find that it's overlapping so much that, hey, what's the difference? It's like when I teach parenting courses, right? I say, 20 years or more ago, parenting roles were defined mostly along gender roles, right? Okay, so you have the fathers, or the mothers who do a lot of things, and the fathers basically are providers, protectors, and what I call punisher in chief. Right? Okay.
Chief executioner.
Chief executioner. Yeah. Okay. Because mothers would tell their children, right? Wait till your daddy gets home. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the mothers, they would do everything else. Okay. But in the last 20 years, you find that, that the roles are overlapping, and there's no need to call it fathering roles or mothering roles. It's called parenting.
Yeah.
Okay. And more, I'm seeing the need for both parents to align their parenting styles, all right, so that the children don't get confused. The children will not get caught in between and then have to play with two parents, you know what I mean? I think same thing here, masculine, feminine, yes, at one time it was quite clear. We thought we understood, but today it's getting quite confusing, And
But
yeah,
we
so
have
I
to
think
also ask ourselves, like, why is it gotten confused? Why has it gotten confusing, right?
What do
I
you think?
when it was clear, okay, where I think it would still be useful is actually what Mervin mentioned, like the biological aspects of it, the difference in the what and also what you mentioned, Parkson, about the what happens in the biological process. Every embryo starts out after fertilization, starts developing as female, and then eventually starts to develop as male. So in that sense, it's still useful to think of it in terms of gender. In terms of the biological sex.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of gender, I think that's where it's gotten very messy, because gender roles have gotten messy in a way. And in that sense, I guess, it's also a response to the weaknesses of the previous characterizations of what's masculine and feminine. Yeah, so even if you want to tackle the messiness, you have to kind of see what caused the messiness first.
I think it's messy, not in a bad way, right? Messy because it's evolving.
Yeah.
And evolving because I think we are all adapting to a new world, right? A new way of life, a new way of commerce, economy, and politics or whatever. So as we are learning to adapt, things get messy,
Of
right?
course.
The boundaries that we used to have, are shifting, and sometimes it makes us a bit nervous.
And it creates tension and
Yeah.
conflict.